Bill 4, the highly debated immigration legislation that would allow Texas law enforcement officers to arrest and deport anyone they suspect of being undocumented with probable cause. KLTV7's Nomi Sanchez has more tonight on the recent response from Mexico to that law and how it could affect its implementation.
That's right. On March 19th, the U.S. Supreme Court allowed SB 4 to go into effect momentarily before it was blocked again. In response, the president of Mexico has stated that if the law is enforced, Mexico will not accept any deportations carried out under it. Gilbert Urbina. He has managed immigration cases for 20 years. He says Mexico's response to SB 4 could cause roadblocks in the deportation process.
If you go to immigration court, you have to acknowledge that the fact that you're here undocumented, and then there is a designation of country, which is where do you want to go if you cannot stay here, and that country has to be willing to accept you back.
But Mexico's stance could force arrested non-citizens to have to stay here, defeating one of the main purposes of the law.
We will have to continue either detain those people continuously or release them back into society while their process is pending.
Since November, general consulates representing Mexico have been gearing up to prepare for SB 4's enforcement.
Town halls, community meetings, to prepare the community, to teach them how to be prepared in a situation like this.
Through their Department of Protection, anyone being deported can call their consulate to help navigate the legal process.
Because in that moment, we can enter, talk to the person, go into the jail, inform their family members, and help them to be prepared for what is coming.
At a local level, nonprofits like the Hispanic American Association of East Texas have been providing informational packages to help.
What it was that they can say and cannot say to officers. We encourage them to be truthful, to give their name and date of birth, but not much information beyond that.
Their main goal, to keep families together if SB 4 goes into effect. Nomi Sanchez, KLTV7 News.
And Mexico has presented arguments to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals saying SB 4 negatively impacts the Mexican community and relationship with the U.S. Hearings on that law are scheduled to resume this coming Wednesday, April 3rd.